Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Dara and Deborah for your very powerful contributions today. I think I'll begin by saying that I have been a childcare provider. I have been an advocate for the childcare sector and for the workers in the childcare sector for quite some time. I've been a mentor with the childcare committees and a troubleshooter to go in and to try and solve issues. So I understand the chronic shortage of staff, that we lost a lot of good people because of a lack of grandfathering practices when the regulations came in 2016, that the burden of administration, that even the preschool regulations seem to be oriented towards avoiding the risk of litigation rather than actually the practical provision of childcare and the needs, and even in the manner in which the Garda vetting is done, that the vetting doesn't travel with the employee in itself is causing real difficulties. So I think I'm very much aware of the challenges in the sector and very much value your intervention. Over the past few months, my party and I'm part of the Policy Lab Committee, we've been running a Policy Lab on care of the child, and one of the real messages coming out of that is this underdevelopment of early childhood policy, of that comprehensive, and that we need to make a seismic shift in how we view childcare and how central that it needs to be universally available, it needs to be community-based and community provided, and that we have a campus model. And in that we've listened to parents, we've listened to providers, and most important, we've listened to the early years professionals. At this moment in time, I suppose I would like to maybe talk about this, the JLC, and my hopes for what comes out of it, of having a standard, of having, and then added to that a career structure and a career plan, so that people can plan the rest of their lives, know that they can get a mortgage, know that they can pay the rent in their year, and that early years professionals need to be very much honoured for the professionals and the role that they have in our society. I hear tell of the JLC taking a long time. So I wondered, did you have anything to illuminate that for us of when we might have an outcome there? And also, what outcomes, I suppose, would you want beyond remuneration, which I think it should be well beyond the living wage and more, but beyond that, what would you like to see as a priority out of it?
Dara or Deborah, whoever wants to come in on those.
I'll say a quick word, couple of words, and then I'm sure Deborah might want to come in then as well. But certainly, like, our ambition, along with a lot of other organisations in the sector, is that people who have degree qualifications should get degree levels of pay. And Mercer, the consultancy firm, did a benchmarking exercise a couple of years ago and set out what those pay scales should look like. Now that's our ambition. That's where we want to get to. The JLC process, it's a legal process. It has to be endorsed through the Oireachtas. But certainly it will be up and running hopefully in the next couple of weeks. And certainly one of the things that we've been waiting for is to know how much money is in the pot, in the budget, and also the new funding model, and that the JLC is kind of integrated into both of those. So it can happen relatively quickly, certainly, absolutely next year, 100%. And even on the short term, we would hope that people would be above the living wage, but that's all dependent on the amount of money that goes into the sector. Providers can only pay the money that they have, and really it's up to the state. As a kind of a key player within it, although it's not the employer, it is funding the vast majority of the sector at the moment. If it wants to help retain staff and drive quality and drive professionalisation, that costs money. So it all kind of depends on how much money the state is willing to kind of put into the sector to make that happen. Deborah, I don't know if you want to come in on that as well.
Yeah, the EWSS has been a model almost that I would like to see continued, and that I'm advocating to see continued, that the state is absorbing that gap.
Yeah, just very briefly. I think the EWSS, it would need to be refined, but that's certainly a really interesting and one that SIP2 has advocated for as well. I think if you did bring in that model where the state was like a primary school model where the state pays the wages, we need to have the wage scale could go along with that to make sure that the educators are properly rewarded. But that is a kind of that is the way to kind of fix the sector, is to have that, to support and build capacity within the services rather than the subsidy approach, which can end up a little bit like the housing assistance payment, where you have subsidies kind of chasing rents the whole time. The same can happen within the earlier sector.
Excellent, thank you.
Deborah, do you want to come in on some of that?
Yeah, I suppose what I'm going to go back to is Deputy Batchik talked about quality within the sector, and that is something that worries an awful lot of people, because I've been in the sector for 15 years, and policy after policy from the government has pushed for quality. And the one thing that has never happened, despite all the asks that's been asked of us, is pay, in a reward for the hard work that we have put in place. But what we're seeing now since 2016, since the staffing crisis has become more and more apparent, is a challenge to quality, is the way I'd put it. One of the big, there's a recent OECD report, a Starting Strong report, and it talks about process quality. Process quality is what they call the key driver of children's development and learning and well-being. And that's to do with interactions. It's got to do with having conversations with children and creating a safe and secure environment for them so that they can blossom. And sometimes we can get mired up in talking about statistics and what's happening next and what's happening now. And I think really what we need to do is, something that can be done next week, and I know there's a lot to do in the future, is if there's an improvement in pay, you're going to stop the exodus of staff from the sector. There may still be a few who'll be able to go down the road and get a better job in a supermarket or a restaurant, better pay there. But there's people who'll stay if you put a bit of hope in the budget next week, where you invest in the JLC. And a byproduct of putting in wages and people staying in the sector is an improvement in quality. And it's an improvement because if you have an average of 23% turnover in settings and 40% turnover in some full day care creches, that type of process quality, it has to start over and over again every time you get a new staff member. And it's not fair on families, it's not fair on children, it's not fair on staff. So there are an awful lot of problems that are there. But I think if you're talking about the future, we can have that conversation. But I think if you can't afford your electricity bill, or you're struggling to save for Christmas, or you're not sure if you're going to be able to put fuel in your car for next week, I think really it's put pay in the pockets of workers, pay in the pockets of early years professionals, and start. A byproduct of that is helping children and families develop that quality sector that I know the department pushes for constantly. And I think you're going to help families, but you're also going to help the professionals who work in the sector. So it's what we're asking for next week, I suppose, is a good foundation to build on over the next couple of years, so that we can build up upon and go back for our next JLC, and improve upon all the time and bring ourselves up to, as we improve the investment going into the sector, bring our wages up to EU levels. Because in other EU countries, early years professionals are vastly better paid than we are. And I suppose, it goes back to, I know people who are just at the end of their tether, managers and staff who have been working through the pandemic, who are burnt out, stressed, and they just want a reward. They don't want appreciation. They don't want a pat on the back or a thank you. What they'd like to see is something concrete and tangible, which is a improvement in their wages next week. Thank you.